Good morning. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us this morning. We're really excited about this topic. I think it will be interesting and a little different from some of the other things that we've done. And the guests that we have today are actually part of the Borshoff team. I think that you'll find this pretty interesting, and we'll have some visuals. We don't typically have a lot of visuals outside of our speakers, so that will be a fun diversion as well today. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, thank you so much for joining us for Shoff Chat. This is a series that we started last year, and it's been quite successful. We try to cover a lot of different topics that have to do with communication, marketing, PR, advertising, really anything that's of interest to us and the people that we serve as our clients and friends of the agency, and try to mix up that content in a way that keeps it interesting and fresh. So we really appreciate everyone joining us, and we hope that you'll join us for future ones. We've been doing this about once every month, and our next topic will be on content marketing. That will take place August the 19th, and our guest will be Andy Robinson, who is with Corteva Agriscience. So more about that in our follow-up and also on our website. But for today, we want to go ahead and get started with the guests that we have. And I have known both of these guests for a little while, a couple of decades, I guess you could say, right, Ryan? We've worked together, and gosh, I guess we're all getting a little older, right? So I've seen Ryan's talent in action many, many times over the years. And more recently, we have added Aaron Scamihorn to our team, and his talent is just amazing as well. And I've really enjoyed seeing some of the things that he's been producing for our clients here at Borshoff. So their talent is a great thing and something that we love to share with our clients. But I think it's really interesting that both of these gentlemen actually do some really interesting things outside of their time at Borshoff. And as we mentioned in the title of today's time, we're talking a little bit about side hustles. And the whole idea of a side hustle in many respects is just an extra job or something that people are doing on the side, typically to make money. As a matter of fact, I found a really interesting statistic recently. About 45% of Americans actually have some sort of a side hustle. And that seems really high and really interesting to me. But what I found even more interesting was that while the majority of those people have a side hustle in order to make a little bit of extra money outside of their regular day job, they actually also cite reasons such as needing a creative outlet or thinking that they have a calling that's not quite fulfilled with their day job 100%. And so I think there are a lot of different reasons why people do things on the side. And sometimes it's not so much a side hustle for dollars as it is more just something that they want to do that's maybe a little bit more of an involved hobby. And so we have kind of a mix of those two things that these two gentlemen are going to share with us today. So really, just to kind of get started, I would love for Aaron, for you to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and really how that intersects with the work that you do here at Borshoff, a creative agency.
Yeah, so to get started, just wanted to put a couple caveats on my side hustle approach. From the beginning, I've been doing this for about 12 years now, as doing something on the side of an agency day job. I've always made it my goal to be like, work comes first, and then also the never compete with your employer. And so with those two rules in place, it kind of guides what I do and what I don't do. And a big driving factor for why I do a lot of that is the contrast idea that one element can support another, in the sense of like, if by day I'm working on a website and it's really nitty gritty and super precise and accurate, like code details, then I go home and I do something that's loose and organic. It kind of recharges a different side of the creative brain so that you can come back to the other thing more energized and more inspired. And balancing out those different creative efforts seems to work for my well of creativity. So I wanted to share some slides here that show a little bit of what I've been doing. A lot of it started with a passion for portraiture. Go full screen here. Okay. So been a big fan of illustrated portraits. Early on, I grew up as a big Andy Warhol fan, and then as more digital realm opportunities came along, big Shepard Fairey fan. But I love that approach of producing a piece that looks like it's broken out into individual layers of color, which translated perfectly into screen printing. So one of the very first side hustles I did was starting a screen printing studio, and I was doing a lot of gig posters. Had an opportunity to work with some really cool bands like Cake and Queens of the Stone Age, Arctic Monkeys, that kind of stuff. But my illustration style kind of translated really nicely into that because it is the shapes and shadows are kind of blocked out into different pieces, so you can lay them down as different layers of ink. And so then that realm of design that incorporates illustration and typography in a marriage together worked perfectly to translate into other things outside of gig posters that got into another realm of my side hustle world, which is label art. And I've done a lot of work with different breweries like Indiana City.
Aaron, your screen is black. I'm sorry. If you can.
Oh, man, I've been sharing this whole time.
End the share and start again, and maybe it'll come back.
Yeah. I was clicking through all this fun stuff. Sorry. All right, let's try this one more time. I think it's that full screen thing, so I'm just going to not go full screen. Okay.
There it is. Yep, we can see it now.
So there we go. What I was clicking through was these different illustrations of how those color pieces are kind of broken up into individual blocks. But then that translates into this label art stuff, incorporating illustration and typography and thinking about what's going to catch someone's eye and be legible and market enough to convince people to pick it up off the shelf. And a couple cans on here, you can see there's another side hustle of mine. I started the Craft Brew Doodle Crew about 6 years ago. It's a group of artists in Indianapolis who get together every third Thursday, and we do musical chair style doodling where it's like you work on a piece for 10 minutes and then you pass it to the person to your right. And so every piece at the end of the night becomes a collaborative effort of everyone at the table. And then the best ones of those end up on cans at Indiana City once a month for a double dry hopped hazy IPA release. So here's some more examples of different label art pieces I've done where illustration, typography, a lot of love for vintage comic book style, anything old and aged. So like that IBWE Lighthouse whiskey was kind of inspired by old matchbook artwork. The Indy 500 one that just came out this year was an old ticket inspiration. Yeah. Then that same love for typography and illustration kind of bled into another passion project of mine. Ever since I was real young, I was enamored with skateboard artwork, and I'd always wanted the opportunity to be able to put some of my illustration, typography, design on some decks. And tried multiple times, had some projects get close to getting released, just never really worked out because every company kind of has their go-to guys to work on it. And over the pandemic, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. I need something else to do here, and found some places to produce them and started after school skateboarding. And so I've released 4 decks, and later this week, actually this Buster Bluth one from Arrested Development is going to be coming back out. So yeah, some classic 90s pop culture. In even some older stuff like the Twilight Zone one, there was a episode that always kind of stuck with me from when I was a little kid. It freaked me out, but I always thought it was really interesting. And then a fun little sneak preview highlight here is that later this fall, the Golden Girls board is going to come out. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
That's great, Aaron. Such an unusual way to express some, pop art types of things that are it's just different than, doing a standard kind of a portrait on a regular medium, I guess. The medium that you're choosing, I think, is really interesting. So before we go to Ryan, I do want to ask you, Aaron, how did you, when you first got into this, it was obviously just a personal passion and a talent that you have that you wanted to explore even more than what you were able to do as part of like a job. But how did you really get started with that in terms of some of the connections that you made and the people that you worked with and the opportunities that you found beyond just doing it yourself and then putting it in a drawer at home,
Right. Yeah, I've given this advice to a lot of different design classes and groups that I've done talks at and whatnot over the years, where it's essentially do what you love and do a ton of it, and eventually someone's going to pay you for it. So I've really taken that to heart, to where it's like, when I wanted to be doing gig posters, I was literally making fake gig posters and posting them on my website like they were real. And someone was like, oh, I like that style. Let's use that same kind of vibe for what we're doing. So it's like, you're not going to find someone to hire you to bake them a wedding cake unless you've baked a bunch of cakes already. So yeah, just doing it.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I know during the pandemic that you got involved in a community effort. Talk a little bit about that, the whole mask up and some of the art that you did related to that.
Yeah, so the portrait art that I've been doing for a while now has gotten a little bit of a name for myself around Indianapolis. We need someone to illustrate some faces. This is a go-to guy. And with the desire for the city to encourage more people to be masking up in the early stages of the pandemic, they wanted to depict people wearing masks, specifically in the kind of younger bar scene community areas, because it seemed like, hey, if we're gonna go drink, there's no reason to wear a mask anyway. So then no one was wearing them. So they wanted to create this impact of showing young people wearing masks in a cool artistic way that could complement the scene instead of just like PSA ads. So I illustrated a group of 4 faces of young multicultural people wearing masks. And I was a part of this group of artists. The initiative was called Mask Up Indie. And there was, I think, 6 or 7 of us. And we each had a giant piece printed on a big banner and hung around the city in those different like kind of bar areas. And they also printed a bunch of these posters and we're handing them out for free at businesses so that they could hang up in their windows to encourage people to mask up before they came in.
Great. So using your talents for all kinds of good in the community. That's really great. So I want to go ahead and turn things for a few moments over to Ryan. Ryan Noel is one of our creative directors here at Borshoff, and Ryan has been involved in a lot of different clients that we have, and he has an interesting, I don't know if you'd call it a side hustle. It's probably started out as more of a hobby, but now is turning into a bit of a side hustle. And it's kind of a little bit unusual. So Ryan, tell us a little bit about what you're up to. And you might be on mute.
Okay. My first Zoom, everyone.
There you are.
So for me, creativity has to come from somewhere, and generally speaking, it's coming from inspiration. And inspiration is rarely going to be found sitting at your desk. And so I think I would start there in terms of selling the side hustle, is that to fill the well that Aaron talked about, you've got to find inspiration. And where does inspiration come from? It comes from everywhere. And for me specifically, it comes from following my own curiosities and my curiosities within curiosities and the curiosities within those curiosities. And so that's kind of what this story is about. The tank that you see on screen is my first ever planted tank, and that came as a result of killing a couple of goldfish that my son got from a carnival and wanting to make good on that, or make it up to him. And so we got a beta fish at out of a sad little cup and mire, and put him in a, slightly less sad environment in a fish bowl. And so I started like, I wonder if this is what beta fish really, do they really live in like stagnant water? And the answer is no, they don't. So I followed my curiosity to find that they actually are, they live in puddles, and they're really skilled jumpers, and they jump from puddle to puddle, and there's new water coming into those puddles and moving out. And so they're constantly getting new oxygenated water and all that. So that's a long way of saying that I saw that there was something better for the beta. And so we went to get a small aquarium at the local aquarium shop, and they had plants, which just happened to be another one of my hobbies or outside interests is gardening and plants. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is opening up a new world. So stuck some plants in a tank and just really enjoyed it. And it's really, I mean, it's nice enough, but it's not where this story is headed. I sort of followed my curiosity into, as part of doing my research, I learned about aquascaping. And aquascaping, simply put, is the arrangement of rocks, wood, driftwood, natural materials, plants to create something that's aesthetically pleasing inside an aquarium. And so this was my first honest attempt at aquascaping on an aquarium that was given to me by a friend of mine. And so when I got this aquarium, I looked up the aquarium model on YouTube and found a guy named George, who now is a friend, is doing a very intentionally designed aquascape. And so that triggers me. I mean, I'd never knew the term aquascaping. So then I follow my curiosity, and down the rabbit hole I go on YouTube, taking in everything I possibly can. And I thought this was kind of interesting as I was looking back for visual resources for this presentation. In the caption of this Instagram post says, "I found my spirit hobby, aquascaping." And that I think really drives at what Catherine was saying, that some side hustles are dealing with a different currency. And it's a currency of inspiration and sort of feeding your creative well and tapping into something that can't be paid for in dollars and cents. So as part of my research, I learned about aquascaping and the potential for aquascaping, and I was like, I want more. So I got another tank and a bunch of hardscape materials. Hardscape is basically just a way of saying rocks and wood. And I just started playing and creating something, and really just kind of, it was an experiment, and was learning. I'd never grown any of these plants. And so it's just seeing what happens. And I ended up entering it into the international aquascaping competition in Japan and got a world rank 611, which is not great, but it's respectable. It's probably the top 25% in the world, and probably top 10% in the United States. So this one I called an Into the Light, and this really was a launch pad. I look at this now and I see that I have had so much room to grow, but it was a solid starting point. So how it's going, what am I up to now? Well, that kind of launched me into this, wanting to explore aquascaping as art. And so, something that I think about a lot is you hear that when musicians are interviewed, they're often asked, do the lyrics come first or the music? And you get varying answers. And I think that's true here too. Is this particular aquascape started with the crudely drawn sketch on the left, which is something that is not foreign to my day job. So you see my day job bleeding into aquascaping, and you'll see aquascaping bleeding into my day job as well. But so here you can see the arrangement of wood and stone and sort of achieving what this vision was. And I scaped this, or I came up with this idea at a time. Well, we're kind of still in it, where it was pre-pandemic, but a very divisive time. And it just seemed like, man, we're never going to feel what unity feels like. And so I kind of built these two sides of wood that are, one is reaching for the other, but never quite getting there. This sort of arching element, which I'll show in a minute, is kind of also sort of yearning and longing for the other side, but never quite getting there. So artistic expression for sure. So this is what it looks like all grown in now. Where the plants, essentially, I refer to them as brush strokes, because they're doing something very similar to what I learned in painting classes in college, and using them to provide direction and energy. And so yeah, that's a finished tank. And this is all sort of dovetailed into Instagram, which is where creators go to have their work validated. Hey, look what I made. I hope you like it. So over time, I've kind of built an Instagram presence. And I think that the interesting overlay here for how it kind of gives back to my day job is that I'm really learning what it takes to build a profile, to build a following, to have meaningful interactions with those who care about the same things that you care about. And those insights have, without a doubt, provided insight and fodder for counseling clients. So it's certainly mutually beneficial. And as part of that, I've built a incredible international community where this particular photo came from a guy named Hugo in France. He lives in Paris, and he reached out to me, and because of all that I'd posted and the insights that I'd posted, he is sending me photos, and then the drawings on top is me providing him feedback. So I would have this on screen, and I'm sort of guiding him through. So again, this is maybe how my day job is filtering into my other passion. So some notes, for instance, is this rock is too flat. You want to create shadow areas. You don't want anything facing directly against the screen, because it just creates an unwanted focal point. And I have suggestions for cutting branches, and you don't want clean cuts on the end of branches, because that looks really unnatural. And so I'm making notes and having an ongoing critical dialogue with someone in Paris, which is something I couldn't have imagined a couple of years ago. And this is doing the Instagram and building my own portfolio of work has also created other opportunities. Like I create and write content for the Reef Aquarium shop here in Indianapolis, and it's all aquascaping inspired, but I get to write about the things that I want to write about. And a lot of times that's about the idea, exploring the ideas. And this particular one is for aquascaping inspiration. And in exchange, I get an employee discount, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you spend as much on the hobby as I do, it adds up. And so there's certainly a monetary piece of this where I'm basically looking to fund my own passion. I'm not looking to get rich. I'm looking for opportunities to create more, and opportunities in the community at large, at shows and those kinds of things. That's the currency that I'm really interested in. And through that relationship with the reef, I'm working on a demonstration tank to be displayed at the reef starting on Friday, actually. So this is just illustrating a hardscape design that I've done for them. And then on the right is a planting illustration. And today I just launched a line of t-shirts that are aquascaping themed. It's not, they're sort of all inside jokes with the aquascaping community, but hopefully can inspire some conversation with those who have no idea what an Amano shrimp is, to help grow the hobby, because it is a niche within a niche. And a primary motivation for me is to grow the hobby and to help other people find the inspiration that I've found. And so this is all towards that end. Again, you know, I may be able to offset some of my hobby costs with the money raised from this, but really it's about contributing to the community at large. And then, so lastly, this is kind of my last big milestone, is I showed you a contest tank that I ranked 611. For this year, I've set a goal for myself to be in the top 200. And my inspiration started in the photo on the left is one that I took with a film camera. Remember those, in Maui? And there's a series of pools that kind of cascade from the volcanic mountain and spilled out into the ocean. So that was my starting point, and I kind of extrapolated that into a concept drawing. It's what you see on the right. And then just wanted to put a few construction photos so you can see I spent hours and hours constructing a landscape that creates the shadow areas that I had concepted in, and is giving that feeling of cascading pools and spilling down into an opening. And so this is highly sensitive because you risk being disqualified if the photo gets out prior to judging, which the results should be out in the next month or two. But I've given you enough to see that it's coming really close, or it came really close to the vision. And so, yeah, I followed my curiosity to this point, and I intend to continue on.
That's great, Ryan. Thank you for sharing. That's so interesting and different from, so many of the things that we see out there right now. So I want to take a quick pause here and just encourage, if anyone has a question or just an observation or something that you want to share, we'd love to make this a conversation. So please feel free to do that. If you want to just let us know in the chat that you would like to share something, then we can actually call on you to share what you want to share. So I want to really invite both Ryan and Aaron to share on one particular question I had, and that is, especially with the pandemic happening in the last year and a half, a lot of people have been struggling with mental health issues, with isolation, with perhaps even difficulties with their work situation, and just a lot of different things being thrown at people. And Ryan, you kind of alluded to this a little bit, that, you know, during the pandemic, some of those things went into your passion went into overdrive on finding new ways to express yourself through aquascaping. I'm curious from both of you what you think about a side hustle and or these extracurricular activities related to stress management and mental health, and if you have any recommendations or just thoughts for people on how they could potentially use something like this to maybe overcome. Because in a sense, you know, it feels like that could be just adding extra things onto your plate at a time when you're already feeling overwhelmed. But I'm guessing for the both of you, it doesn't necessarily feel that way at all, and you're finding a lot of relief from stress and things like that. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I think that's definitely true. And there's with my hobby and side hustle specifically, I mean, there's a lot of science to back up that aquariums in general, you see them in dentist's office and where there's therapy happening for a reason. I mean, there's science to back up that. And I also think, you know, just in the winter time, having these bright lights and this nature is therapeutic. But I think to go a little bit different direction, I think the biggest thing that helped me in those times was finding a common passion with a lot of other people that I didn't know. So it created connections where I never knew that there could be any. And so that I think has been probably the most exciting thing, exciting development, is that I've just found all kinds of connection around the world around a shared passion, and that's been really inspiring in its own way, and has fed me deeply during the pandemic, especially, but you know, even still.
Yeah, and from my angle, the speaking of the science informing some of that, the bulk of the creative endeavors that I have result in me making something, wanting other people to see it and appreciate it. And I think that's kind of at the core of any kind of creative effort, is like, I'm not making this just for myself, I'm making it to share with people, and the excitement around them getting excited about it too, potentially hanging it in their home or displaying it on their shelf, or using it in a skateboard scenario. Fuels some of that like endorphin level boost of satisfaction as a result of your creativity.
Yeah, I do think, you know, Aaron and I are both talking about creative pursuits, and I think what I would want to get across is that even if it is not, your side hustle isn't creative per se, I think the principle of sharing or pursuing your curiosities and going deeper on something and finding the interest within interest sort of narrows the pool of people who are really interested in that same thing. And it's amazing how quickly relationships and friendships can be forged even over distance around something that is, you know, it feels like it's uniquely yours. And I think that could be done in just about any, you know, charcoal grilling or, you know, other, you know, kind of periphery hobbies that I've had before that haven't quite gone this deep. But I think that would be something that I think that anyone could take away.
Yeah, that's great. I love the community aspect. I feel like that is really what is very likely to keep you not only motivated, but getting a lot of other value out of it, because it's beyond just yourself. So that's a really great point. So Ryan, Meg has a very specific technical question for you in the chat, if you want to take a look at that. And then once we get through that, I actually have another question for Aaron as well.
Okay, so Meg is asking specific question about light levels and oxygen levels and those kinds of things. And so, yeah, there is a little bit of management there. Generally speaking, you're trying to find a balance between not oxygen necessarily, but CO2. CO2 is what plants need to thrive and survive. And when you inject CO2 into water, it sort of unlocks all kinds of potential for aquatic plants that may be slower growing. But in order to, if you're giving them all that food, they need the light to match. So you want to provide, generally speaking, it's like, I don't want to get overly scientific because it's not that interesting, but generally speaking, I am starting with my light levels. I want to have my lights on about 8 hours a day, and then I make adjustments to the CO2 levels that go into the tank. But there's also filter maintenance that comes into play. I mean, it's about maintaining a healthy ecosystem and looking to achieve balance. Does that answer your question? I'm looking for cues, Meg.
Great, thank you. So Colin asked the question of both of you. Aaron, maybe if you want to start with this, this is very similar to the question I was going to ask you as well. It's just your extracurricular activities are very likely to be meditative and help you with focus. Do you often find your mind solving work problems in the background while you're engaged in aquascaping or illustration? So Aaron, why don't you start with that?
Yeah, I think with that whole idea of the contrast where each side kind of supports each other. If all you do is one form of production for every bit of effort, it's hard to unlock those other sides of thinking, looking at it from a different angle. So absolutely, there's been some scenarios where the right idea comes to mind when I'm doing something that isn't about ideas. And I think that it also, from that same angle, I didn't really speak to this much when I was showing my stuff, but the elements that have gained me experience in some of the efforts have directly impacted some of the problem solving at the day job. So it's like we recently did some label work for a distillery where my previous experience working on labels for spirits immediately informed that and gave me a leg up to be able to get us through the process faster. The TTB approvals for liquor labels are extremely strenuous and very, very specific. And it often takes lots of back and forth. And when we submitted theirs, there was just like one tiny little tweak, and they're like, a new distillery never has this close to accurate on their labels. So that was cool to see that inspire that other element.
Yeah, my answer is, yeah, it's a little bit different for me because just as a person, it's hard for me to do two things at once. I sort of need to get locked in and totally focused. So when I'm aquascaping, I'm like completely in that like flow state doing that. But where it is beneficial is that like last night, for instance, had a couple of meetings that went, right up until the end of the workday. And I'm the kind of person who needs to like break a mental cycle, whether that be through exercise or whatever. I just need to like do something different. So going down to my basement and starting to glue some wood together and handle some stones. It's what my tactile sense and my brain needs. And then I can, because there was still work to do, I'm able to then come back and I've sort of reset. That's really what it is it gives me sort of a reset, allows my brain to work in a different way, and sort of frees it up to think a little bit more clearly. So I think that's probably how I use it more, is as a transition from one activity to the next a lot of times, especially if I'm using it for a therapeutic way, or if I'm needing to feel creative again, or be able to think clearly.
Great. Erin, you mentioned something earlier that I want to go back to in a little bit more detail. And it was that collaborative design event where you sat with other artists and you all contributed in almost like a round table kind of a thing. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what exactly that was, how that worked, and also really what's the, I would suspect that working in that kind of situation where you're literally kind of on the fly creating together as a group could have some challenges, but could also have some real exciting, inspiring elements to it as well. So talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, check it out on Instagram if you get a chance. It's the Craft Brew Doodle Crew. It is become its own like entity. This weird beast that kind of formed itself as we just started playing around. It started from this idea of there's an event called Draft and Draw in New York where they have like artists come together, and there's a speaker talking about how they use sketching and whatnot in their career, and then the attendees all have this tablecloth in front of them, where it turned into this event where they were all just like kind of drawing on the tablecloth together, and it was kind of collaborative, but while they were listening to the speaker. And wanting something similar to that, I thought it'd be cool to do that kind of thing here, but I was like, it'd be cool if the intention was more around that collaboration on the tablecloth. So some of the early events was just that. It was like we covered a table in like butcher paper, and then everyone just doodled on that. But then as we were going along, we're like, we could actually make this something, because some of these little pieces are cool enough that we'd cut them out, we'd hang them on the wall and sell them. And that grew even further to where it's like, if we had a framework to start with, or a theme per station, it could kind of guide the initial impact of where you're headed with it. But there's still that challenge, like you're talking about. If someone starts the drawing of a body of some creature, and you got to add the head to it, there's no time to plan for that. There's no time to even really think about it that much, because you got 10 minutes to do your next step. You got to take it, you got to jump off, you got to start adding on to what someone else before you started. And yeah, it's definitely an event that gets your creative juices flowing, and it's very much a certain personality type that kind of thrives in that too. So over the years, we've had probably 150 different people come in and out, but it's kind of refined itself down to a core like 12, 15 people who now continuously come every month. But yeah, and then through the pandemic, it's been interesting too, where we had to evolve that in a way that we can't draw on the same piece that the last person's worked on. So we create a framework, and everyone kind of has their own little nook and their own little space to work within, to make it all go together. So like the last one we released was a stained glass piece, and each artist had their own like segment of the stained glass, but the overall color palette and line weight and whatnot was dictated at the beginning, so that we could know that, hey, the theme is patron saints of beer. How do you interpret that? And you work within that same realm.
Great. So as we wrap up, I'd love to have both of you comment a little bit more about how someone who's thinking about getting into a side hustle or some sort of, extracurricular type of an activity, how they can do that. And also just, the two of you come from obviously a very creative field and have some really amazing talents that are not widespread and common among a lot of people. Some of us cannot even draw stick figures very well. I would be in that group. So I don't want anyone to be intimidated by thinking, well, I can only do this if I'm a writer, or I'm a designer, or I have some sort of ultra talent that I already use in my day job. So what kind of words would you have of encouragement for them on how they can discover what that thing could be and go ahead and get going on it?
I think it's all about joy. I think it's finding what brings you joy and just doing that thing, whatever outlet that is. And even if it doesn't go any further than you just getting to do some of those things for yourself, if you're stoked about doing it, you just got to do it. And then if it takes off from there, obviously that's awesome, and it can help it grow and eventually help pay for itself. Ryan was talking about.
Yeah, I think my answer would be similar in that yeah, it's sort of being, I think just in my mid 40s, I was at a place where I was becoming self-aware enough to know that what really, and asking myself the questions like, where am I happiest? You know, like what am I doing when I'm most happy? And having that recognition that I really love, like having my hands in the dirt and I'd walk around my garden every day. And so, you know, what are those things that that bring you pleasure? And and then sort of finding, I mean, we're at such a privileged age where, you know, the internet and connection has never been easier. And it's just amazing to me that there is always a niche within a niche within a niche. And that there happened to be that I never knew existed 2 years ago, that, you know, my love and like attraction to water and fish that I always had as a kid, and plants that I really have grown to love as an adult, that those two sort of passions and interests could be aligned. And so I think it really is about, you know, being self-aware enough to know what is bringing you the most pleasure, and then the curiosity to start to probe and just spend time. And so I think that the side hustle kind of comes later, you know, like it's about really sort of a self-assessment and like what you really love, and what you enjoy doing, and what is freeing your mind up in a way that you can, the other 8 hours of your day are more productive. And you can actually bring some more, and you're sort of filling your well. So I think that's for the people that aren't doing that yet. I think I would just start by, you know, like some reflection on like, what do I really love doing? And without the hope of a side hustle, but maybe it becomes that.
That's great advice. Joy and curiosity. I think when you combine those two, that could definitely take you some really interesting places. Okay, so one last question from Savannah. She asked about if the two of you primarily use Instagram, or if there are other social media sites that you use to connect with those that care about the same things that you care about, and even to do that collaboration. And it sounds like, for example, Erin was mentioning there's just some local groups actually, as opposed to just social media. But you both also talked about Instagram. Are there other things like that?
Instagram seems to be the most visually focused. So doing these visual creative outlets, it's the right fit. And I hit 5 Instagram accounts for my different endeavors. And I think that's as many as you can manage without it becoming ridiculous. But it is already a little ridiculous. Someone recently jokingly told me that I was a serial entrepreneur. It sounds fun and creative. I'm going to do it and see where it can go.
There's a few options. I do primarily use Instagram, and that's more of a bandwidth issue. Like I can only sort of manage one extra thing, but Facebook is pretty good for like discussion groups. And you know, I do have like some critique groups that I'm in on there, and so you can find some interest groups where the conversation can be a little bit more continuous and ongoing. But also with my hobby in particular, and I suspect this is the case in other pursuits, message boards are sort of a dinosaur, but they're also probably the place where the most rich exchange of ideas and information is still happening. Where you can really get people take the time to provide really deep answers, and you can track the lifespan of an entire aquarium in like diary type fashion. So you can learn a lot, and that's like the the granola type stuff that is really good for you, but is just a lot to take in, and is something that I don't necessarily have time for now. Right now, my contributions need to be sort of bite-sized and beautiful. So Instagram makes the most sense for me right now, but there are other avenues. I know Pinterest too is used a lot for, you know, there's a lot of selling of stuff on there, but it's also a place to put your ideas up and get it kind of collated, I guess, with other similar things, and so the sharing of ideas, I think that's another promising place, especially for those who are making things or yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. So, gentlemen, thank you for doing this today. I think this was really interesting and hopefully inspiring to some of the folks who've been with us. Aaron hit some of his Instagram tags in here for various accounts if you all want to look at that. But we will also send out a recap summary from today and with a link to the recording for this, and also several links to Instagram pages and things like that. So you'll have all of those resources, and you can follow these guys if you're interested. And maybe we have future aquascapers in the room. Who knows? So thank you all for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, our next Shoff chat will be on August 19th. And we'll be sending out information and a registration link for that soon. So look for that. Thank you for joining us. And if you have other topic ideas for us in the future, we'd love to hear them. Please drop us an email or tag us in one of our social media channels at Borshoff. And we would love to consider those and work with you to find the next great topic. So thank you so much, and everyone enjoy your day.